Lock the door if we arrive 5 minutes late. Okay. So, this story is going to be very short, as it didn't happen to me, but to a fellow professor last year. Last year, the university I teach wasn't particularly strict on attendance. The only thing not attending would get you was a call asking if you want to keep paying for the class if you're not using them at all. There are no refunds, but they could sign you out midway through so you didn't pay extra. Aside from that, it was up to the teacher to control how they wanted attendance to affect their class. This one professor decided to be incredibly strict about it, and the students hated him for it. He would physically lock the door once 5 minutes passed, and would not open it again for any reason whatsoever. If you were 5 minutes late, you lost that lesson. Some students started sitting on the hallway and talking notes while looking through the glass doors when that was an option. One day I arrived to teach my lesson and all the students are giggly and happy. It just so happened that the professor himself arrived 5 minutes late that day, and the students locked him out of the classroom for an entire hour. I suspect he was too embarrassed to ask for a key and, in the process, having to admit why he was locked out. Needless to say, he never locked the doors again. Edit: I guess I should have mentioned it in my post, but I was reminded of this story after reading another post in this sub. This happened around May of 2019 and at the time it was very minor, so I forgot about it until today. Now to the comments. I had a history professor who would lock the door after he arrived, so if you saw him in the hallway you knew to hustle. He did always come a couple minutes late to allow a little leeway and would let you in if you arrived at the same time he did, so wasn't too bad about it and was very cool otherwise. One guy came late to an exam. Was not let in. That's when you bang on the door for the duration of the entire test. Look, Professor. We both know you're trying to limit disruption. Would you rather have the disruption of a latecomer, or 2 hours of my best metronome impression? It so happens that my schedule is wide open for that time. That was my speech professor's policy too. He coupled this one with a strict attendance policy. We couldn't miss more than 3 classes, but we were considered absent once he locked the door. OP replied, I never understood this kinda policy for absences. The way I do it is basically considering the class a courtesy. You can come in if you'd like. If you arrive late it's fine as long as you're not disruptive. Your attendance will directly affect your performance on tests anyway, and your final score will suffer by your own choices. This year, for instance, I changed one of the tests to be an assignment to be delivered online, and the students could ask questions via email. This one girl who never showed up to any of the Zoom calls sent an email saying I don't know how to start this task, and my reply was review the material from the class dictated on X date. The procedures should be clear from there. She failed. This particular professor failed me, but oh well. It was partially my fault, incorrectly done speeches, and speech timing issues. But his attendance policy screwed me over. It was to the point that I would be in sight of the classroom, but still late enough to be locked out. I was tired of being punished for the delays of the train or bus, and didn't like that my job as election judge was still adding to my absences. He was quite vocal about our civic duty to vote, but it still counted against me. Reminds me of a stats professor I used to have as a sophomore in college. The class was split into lecture and lab sections. Lab was basically 80 minutes of doing lots of arithmetic by hand, designed to be long enough that most people wouldn't be able to finish in class, and the rest had to be done at home and handed in next lab if needed. I happened to be extremely fast at simple arithmetic due to some natural proclivity, and having going to an elementary school where we were drilled hard and often on it. So, it took me about 30 minutes to complete. I handed it in and walked out silently. He stopped me and asked me where I thought I was going. I'm done, so I'm leaving. Lab time isn't over though. Do the work again. No, I did the work, I get the material, and I'm leaving. You need to redo the work. No, I don't. I did it. The syllabus doesn't require that I sit in here for 80 minutes, just that I complete the labs. I'm paying for this class, and there is no value in me redoing simple arithmetic that I clearly know how to do. And I left. Next lab he gave me the paper with something like a 98%, and told me I probably would have gotten 100 if I redid the work. What was the top score? 98. Good enough for me. That's a terrible attitude. What if this were real life and real people depended on these? Then we'd be doing this on spreadsheets or something. Professor Tucker, though we didn't call him that, and I did not get along at all. He even tried the same garbage on my final 3 hours to do an hour of mostly rote arithmetic. Yes, I double-checked my work twice. That's why it took so much longer than normal. What if you missed something because you were in a hurry? Dude, I could get a 0 on this and still walk out of here with a B, before the curve. I'm fine with the results. I had an evil calculus teacher in high school who pulled the same crap when I turned in an exam early. She actually threatened me, if you turn that in now, you'd better get a 100. I was good at math and had gone over my work 3 times already, so I gave it a moment's thought. And turned it in. I spent the next few days sweating bullets while she graded. I got it back with a 100. But no apology. Made up for my high school calc teacher. Some of us were friends with the TAs, and it was the first class after lunch, and the top students, so as long as we weren't disruptive when we came in, she didn't care. One of the quarters was student taught. We each taught a section in pairs. It was pretty great. On the other side, she was a testing monster. Some of the tests were pass/fails, and they were not easy. I ended up with the top grade in that class, averaging something like a 72%, which curved up to an A. Something went right though. I want to say only 2 of class didn't get a 4 or better on the AP test. I turned up 5 minutes late for a new class when I was at college. As I walked in, the lecturer looked at me, looked stunned and bellowed, "It was you who got my daughter pregnant and run off." Then a moment later, calmly, "Oh no, my mistake, he was much taller. Welcome to the class." He turned out to be one of those awesome teachers who would go out of his way for you and give us really unusual and interesting lessons, including afternoons out around town teaching us some local history. Just don't mess him around, it was his way or the highway. When I started university, I had my economics professor who used to lock the door even if we were a minute late. Once she made me in charge for making sure that all students had received the study material for her class. Guess what? I was 3 minutes late for class and she locked the door. I kept banging at the door but she wouldn't open it. So, I took the original notes she had, and bunked her class for the entire semester. My college didn't monitor attendance that much. She had to remake 1,000 pages worth of new notes for the entire class. Moral of the story: don't be a witch to someone who has the original copy of your notes that are gonna be used for an entire semester. That really deserves its own post. 100% agree, though I could use some clarity/context of the term bunked. I also had a professor that did this, only we didn't have the 5 minutes. His class was required to obtain my degree area. He taught it at 7 a.m. 5 days a week and you needed to be there by 7 or were locked out. One accepted absence only. I remember trudging across campus in the dark and snow watching my friends headed home doing the obligatory walk of shame, lol. This professor also ran a consulting business in my degree area, and our projects were all on copyrighted forms owned by him. He maintained the right to utilize any of our submissions/final project in his own business. That always chapped my hide, personally. OP replied, "I know it's customary for works done by students to be copyrighted and owned by the university, though that's just so they can parade your work around and show how good their alumni are. I never heard of a professor personally owning said copyright and using it for his business. That sounds incredibly shady." This was in 1983 to 84, so not sure if the laws back then. I recently disposed of it and it was his company's name on it. I also remember that as students we all talked about it. It definitely wasn't the university. Attendance grades in college shouldn't exist in the first place. The punishment for missing class should be me not receiving the lecture, which in turn should affect my grade. If I can get an A in your class without even attending, then why am I even paying you? My dad decided one semester that he wasn't going to class, just midterms and finals. I think a bet was involved that he had to get straight A's. This was engineering school too. So, my dad skips classes, shows up at midterm and had to prove once or twice that he was in the class. Got A's on his midterms. Goes to take finals and one teacher called dad out on his attendance and told my dad he'll fail. My dad got a B in that class and for the stupidest reason. He added 2 by 3 instead of multiplied. The rest of the classes he got A's.